The Midnight Visitor. It was a stormy night in the small town of Ravenswood, where whispers of ghosts and unsolved mysteries lingered in the cold, damp air. Clara, a young woman in her 20s, had recently moved into a quaint old house on the outskirts of town. The house, surrounded by a dense forest, had been abandoned for years, its previous owners disappearing without a trace. Clara was drawn to the house's eerie charm, with its creaking wooden floors and antique furniture covered in dust. She thought she could make a fresh start here, far away from the noise of the city. The locals had warned her about strange occurrences in the house, but she brushed off their superstitions as nonsense. One evening, after a long day of unpacking, Clara decided to relax by the fireplace. The wind howled outside and the rain battered against the windows. As she sipped her tea, she heard a soft knock at the door. Startled, she glanced at the clock. Midnight. Who could be visiting at this hour in such weather? She hesitated but finally rose to answer the door. When she opened it, no one was there. The rain poured down in sheets and the wind whipped around her, but there was no sign of any visitor. Clara shivered and quickly closed the door, locking it behind her. Returning to her seat by the fire, she tried to shake off the unease that had settled over her. But just as she was beginning to relax, she heard the knock again, this time louder, more insistent. Her heart pounded in her chest as she approached the door, every step slower than the last. When she opened the door again, she was met with the same empty porch. But this time something caught her eye. There, on the ground, was a single wet footprint. It was large, much larger than any normal human foot. The print was smeared, as if whatever had made it had dragged its foot through the mud. Fear clawed at Clara's throat as she slammed the door shut, bolting it and pushing a heavy chair in front of it for good measure. She backed away slowly, her breath coming in short gasps. What kind of creature could leave a footprint like that? Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the fire in the hearth sputtered out, plunging the room into darkness. Clara fumbled for the flashlight she had left on the coffee table, her hands trembling. When she finally found it and switched it on, the beam cut through the darkness, revealing the room unchanged, except for one thing. In the corner, just beyond the reach of the light, stood a tall figure, its body draped in shadow. It was impossibly tall, its head nearly brushing the ceiling, and its eyes, oh, those eyes, glowed a sickly yellow in the dark. Clara froze, the flashlight shaking in her grip, as the figure slowly began to move toward her. It made no sound, but the air grew colder with every step it took. She wanted to scream, to run, but her legs were rooted to the spot, her voice caught in her throat. As the figure approached, it reached out a long, bony hand, its fingers curling like talons. Clara finally found her voice and screamed, the sound echoing through the empty house. The figure stopped, tilting its head as if considering her fear. And then, in a voice like the rustling of dead leaves, it spoke. "You should have never come here." With a flash of lightning, the figure disappeared, leaving Clara alone in the dark, her heart racing and her mind reeling. She didn't sleep that night, too afraid to close her eyes, fearing that the figure would return. The next morning, Clara packed her bags and left Ravenswood, never to return. The house, once again abandoned, stood silent and still, waiting for its next visitor, who would surely ignore the warnings just as Clara had. But the townsfolk knew better. They knew that whoever entered that house would never be truly alone, for the midnight visitor was always watching, always waiting, just beyond the shadows.